Before we come to the next item of business, I know that members will wish to join me in welcoming to the gallery the Ambassador of Iceland, His Excellency Benedict Jónsson. We come now to the next item of business, which is questions to the First Minister. Question number 1 from Ian Gray.
To ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Engagements to take forward the Government's programme for Scotland.
Presiding Officer, the First Minister has a woeful record on building consensus, but yesterday he managed it. He united all the opposition parties in the Chamber in agreement that his budget is a cynical, short-term stopgap measure in a vain attempt to get re-elected. Everyone knows he put the short-term interest of his party before the long-term interest of his country. Especially at a time like this, is that not an abdication of his responsibility as First Minister?
First Minister.
Can I just refresh Ian Gray's memory? I mean, this idea that this is the first time he's been unified with the Tories and the Liberal Democrats. As I remember, in the Edinburgh Trams project, there was unity between the Labour Party, the Liberals and the Conservatives. And as a former minister who announced the tram project, I'm quite surprised that Ian Gray can't remember that. In terms of the budget presented yesterday, it tackled the huge issue facing this country of a £1,300 million cutback in public finance available to Scotland this coming year. The largest decline in public expenditure, not just in the history of devolution, but in the history of public spending. Now, that was what Mr Swinney faced. That is what he faced down. That is why we've taken the tough decisions required. And that is why this government will be re-elected next May.
Ian Gray.
What Mr Swinney himself said yesterday was that this budget was more than a one-year challenge. And he then immediately failed his own test. Alec Neil admitted on TV, I was standing right beside him, that if they get past the election, then they will bring out the three-year budget. What is the First Minister hiding? What happens in years 2 and 3 of his spending plans that he won't tell us now?
First Minister.
Well, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, Andy Kerr used that line yesterday. That point is in the budget document. Perhaps Ian Gray now. I mean, Andy Kerr could argue he only had an hour or two to read it. Ian Gray has had 24 hours to read it. And the point that's made in the budget document is that the Christie Commission, Campbell Christie and his commission, will be examining structural change in Scottish public services, will present a report in order to take forward the government's plans for Scotland. Now, I can see the Labour benches looking desperately. They've all had 24 hours. Am I meant to assume that they can't find a section in the budget report, or am I going to have to draw it to their attention? It is exactly right that John Swinney has faced the biggest decline in Scottish public spending, has taken the decisions required to face up to that. It is also right for us to point out that the Labour, Conservative and Liberal Democrats are united on something else. They have no alternative future for Scotland except a generation of cutbacks led by Westminster government. And let's also remember, while Labour condemn the Condemn coalition, that we know that 2/3 of these cutbacks were promised by Alistair Darling in a regime that was deeper and tougher than those of Margaret Thatcher. So not only facing down the immediate challenge, but also saying to Scotland, give us the economic power to grow the economy and take us into a better future.
Yeah, I've read the budget document. Even it wasn't as tedious as Alex Salmond's answers. And yes, it's full of commissions and reviews and contracts and concordats. It just has no answers in it. All budgets.
Order. Order. Sit down, please, Mr Gray. I understand the political situation that is around this chamber. It is entirely understandable that members are somewhat overexcited. What I cannot tolerate is that when the chair of this Parliament asks for order, he or she does not get it. That cannot remain, and I must ask members that when I ask for order, it is given. Mr Gray.
Presiding Officer, all budgets are about priorities, especially this one. So let's look at the First Minister's priorities. We've obtained the information that last year, as Scotland tried to recover from recession, he spent £500,000 on the 16 members of staff in his speechwriting unit. I've heard Alex Salmond's speeches. Can we have our money back, please?
First Minister, and fairly briefly, please.
As is well known, in terms of special advisers and administration costs of this government, they are dramatically lower than the administration of which Ian Gray was a member, or indeed the last administration. But let's talk about the choices facing Scotland. We announced yesterday a difficult policy of a pay restraint in the public sector because we believe it's right to maintain and save jobs in Scotland. That's not an easy thing to do, it's a tough thing to do. Now, Ian Gray says that he supported it. He said that in BBC on the 29th of October. We have to have significant pay restraint, probably close to a pay freeze, he said, adding, certainly over a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years. Fine. But yesterday I saw him outside this Parliament demonstrating beside a banner saying no pay freeze. And then this morning I heard him on the radio when he was asked, does he support pay restraint? He replied, well, I do, coughs. Excuse me, I do support pay restraint, and I've said that before. Well, if he supports pay restraint to save jobs, then what was he doing yesterday with a banner? He's the first opposition leader in history to hold a demonstration against his own policy.
Ian Gray.
Presiding Officer, I'll stand alongside workers trying to save their jobs any day of the week.
Order.
The only job the First Minister is really trying to save is his job. Yeah. Well, he should start by doing it. Absolutely. A reform of the teaching profession. No idea. Someone else can sort it out in June. Public service reform. No idea. Someone else can sort it out in June. Higher education funding. No idea. Someone else can sort it out in August. No ideas, no answers, no leadership. Alex Salmond, he used to fancy himself as a Celtic lion. Doesn't this budget show he's just a cowardly lion instead?
First Minister.
But Ian Gray wasn't outside demonstrating for jobs yesterday. He was out demonstrating beside a banner which said no pay freeze, diametrically opposed to what his policy is. But we shouldn't be too surprised, because on the other choices facing Scotland, whether we should have a social contract, as proposed by this government, which says to people, look, there are valuable gains we've made in terms of freezing the council tax, removing prescription charges in return for that pay restraint. Where does Ian Gray stand on that? He's changed his mind 3 times on the council tax. First he said it was to rise. Then he said it wasn't to rise in terms of an interview in the BBC, and then at his conference he said it was to rise, but he was going to cap it. Rather than tell me what we should do over the next 4 years, why doesn't Ian Gray make up his mind about what his policy is for next year? John Swinney's taken the big decisions. He's faced up to the biggest decline in public spending in the history of devolution. He's put forward tough but fair policies to maintain jobs, protect workers in Scotland. But above all, like everyone in these benches, he has a vision of getting economic control over the economy of Scotland to grow our way, as opposed to the cut of Labour, Tory and the Liberal Democrats.